Few things strike fear into the heart of sales reps quite like cold calling. And do you know where that fear comes from? Well, most of the time it's a lack of control. Because the more control we have over any situation, the less afraid of it we're going to be, and the same goes for cold calling. So if you want to eliminate your cold calling fears for good and you want to make some serious money doing it, then you just need a simple process or framework to follow so that you know what to do at each step of the call, and that's where control is going to come from. And that's what we're talking about today, our 5-step cold calling framework and how to implement it today. Hi, my name is Will and I make selling simple. So in this video, we're going to cover the same proven cold calling framework that we use inside Selling Made Simple Academy. And it's a framework so easy that you've only got to use it a couple of times for it to really stick for good in your brain. First off, we're going to confirm, we're going to break the status quo, we're going to share value, we're going to tie things in, and then we're going to close the next meeting. And don't worry, we're going to cover examples of exactly what to say in each of these individual steps as well. So there's no guesswork needed. Okay. With that said, let's jump right into it. So the first step of this cold call framework is to confirm. You've got to confirm that you're speaking, of course, to the right person. And that means 9 times out of 10, the decision maker. You want to be speaking to exactly whoever decides whether to buy or not. Because otherwise you're going to deal with a gatekeeper who's then got to convince their boss to make a purchase, or some end user who's not got any authority in the account whatsoever. And along the way, every time that your message that you give to the individual gets passed on, just like Chinese whispers, it's very likely to get diluted. So what does this look like in practice? So you might say, hi, it's Will from salesman.org. Who's in charge of sales training? If you're in front of the right person, the prospect might say, hey, that's me. In which case, fantastic. Easy, you can move on to the next step. Otherwise, the prospect might say, oh, well, that's Barry. You need to deal with him. Now, of course, we need to get in touch with Barry. And then you can say, okay, thanks. Could you connect me with him? And can I tell him that you referred me? Dead simple question. And then you're going to move on to the next step with Barry. And make sure not to skip the referral aspect of all of this here, because noting a referral creates an instant boost in rapport with the next step of the conversation. So that's the confirm step. Now we need to go through the break step. And this is all about breaking the prospect out of their status quo, which is then being comfortable with the solution they're using right now. So we need to ask them if their current solution is actually working out or not. And it turns out, having done tens of thousands of these calls with our Selling Made Simple Academy members now, they found that the prospect will most likely tell you that there's some kind of problem. Things can always be cheaper, faster, or more effective. So next up, you're going to pop this question. Okay, great. How are you training your sales reps right now? The prospect might say, oh, we're using, whatever competitor it is in the marketplace. So you're going to then say, okay, got it. And how is your sales training working for you right now? The prospect can only really come back with 2 different responses. In scenario 1, they're going to say, not great, we're having a problem with this, we're having a problem with that, which is fantastic. Amazing. You've now almost certainly got an opportunity to book a meeting to discuss it with the prospect. Otherwise, your buyer might turn around and say, oh, we're fine, we're all set. Thanks. Now, it's really so incredibly important at this point that no matter what the prospect's response is, you still move on to the next step. Even if they tell you they've already got a solution that's working great, you still push forward to the next step, which is the value step of the call, step number 3. This is where you're going to give a very succinct and short snippet of what you have to offer. Don't go crazy on the details here. Just hit the biggest problem and the most important way that what you're selling solves it. It should be no longer than 1 sentence. And remember, you've got to push through this step, regardless of whether the prospect seems pleased to chat with you or if they are massively a fan of their current supplier. It doesn't matter. You've got to go through this step. And you're going to find that buyers are going to be open to new solutions more often than what you might expect. And if they push back, don't stress. You've only got about 3 more sentences to get through, 10, 15 seconds max. So let's look at what this value statement could look like in practice. So over at Selling Made Simple Academy, if I was doing this call, if we were doing this call live, I would say, well, hey, we help salespeople find and close more deals in the next 30 days or your money back. See, just quick, succinct, and it hits all of the main points here. You don't have to be any more complicated than that. And then you can move on to step number 4, which is the tie-in. Here's where you're going to tie in the value of your product that you just outlined to what the prospect is currently going through. You need to have a think about how you can help, what kind of benefits are going to matter to them, and what can they expect to see from working with you. And more than anything else, essentially what we're doing, if I had to distill this point down into one question, we've got to answer the question, why the hell should they care about us, this phone call, and booking another meeting? So here's what this might look like in our scenarios. So in scenario one, where the prospect isn't happy with their current provider, we might say, hey, well, it seems like you're not happy with your current sales training solution. Would it make sense to see if we can solve this problem for you? Alternatively, in scenario two, if the prospect says that they are pretty happy with what they've got going on at the moment, you can ask the question, would it make sense to see if we can turbocharge your current solution so that you can train more effective sales reps more quickly? So here you bridge the gap from the value that you offer in this more generic value proposition statement into what the buyer might actually want, given the response in the previous step of we are happy or we're not happy with our current solution. So you've customized the call here, you have got their attention, you've tied it with their wants and needs. And now it's time to move on to the most important step of this entire process that often salespeople miss out completely. They'll do great. They'll use whatever framework or process to get the cold call up to this point, and then they chicken out. This is the most important step. You've got to close the next meeting. Otherwise, this is all a complete waste of time. This is where the rubber really meets the road, ladies and gentlemen. This is where everything that you've done up until this moment combines into the sweet success of a yes or, occasionally maybe a no. It's time to make the ask. And of course, the goal here isn't to make the sale. The goal here isn't to continue the conversation for another 5 minutes, to pitch and pitch and pitch. No one in their right mind is going to agree to buy any kind of large deal size enterprise product or SaaS product or capital product, whatever you're selling in the B2B space. No one in their right mind is going to agree to buy that after a 15, 30-second conversation. So instead, and keep this at the back of your mind, keep this as the whole point of the cold call that you're making, your goal, your aim is to set up the next meeting, schedule a call. That is it. That's all you've got to do. So what does this process look like? Well, you might ask the question, okay, great. Sounds like we might be able to help you. Does it make sense to jump on a quick 10-minute call tomorrow to see if we can actually get this to happen? And bam, it's as simple as that. You don't even have to use any tricky wording. There's no psychology. There's no hacks of any of this. Just ask the question, hey, does it make sense to jump on a call to see if we can help with this? I think we can probably help you. Now, the very nature of cold calling, you're interrupting random people that you don't know if you can help them yet because you've not had a chance to qualify them, means that you're going to get no's every now and again, even if you've done every single thing else right. But that doesn't mean it's time to give up. Instead, you can follow up with email sequences and cadences because it might not be the right time to book a meeting right now, but it might be a good time in a week from now once the conversation you've had has been at the back of their brain and they're going, oh, the sales training we are receiving is a bit crappy. Maybe we should look at alternatives. And when you do get a bunch of yeses out of this cold call framework, then just mark it on your calendar because you just scored a sales meeting with a brand new lead. Congratulations. I love it. There's nothing better than picking up the phone, doing a bunch of calls. Sure, it can be a little bit laborious because, again, you're interrupting people. You're hoping that the person you're engaging with is in the right frame of mind, that they've got the opportunity, that they've got the time, 15, 30 seconds to speak with you, and they're not too pissed off because you've interrupted them. But using this framework, going through it step by step, going through the confirm step, the break, the value, the tie-in, and then finally assertively asking for the close, asking for the next. That's all you've got to do to turn a lot of these cold calling, stressful mornings into opportunity generating machines. So step one, confirm that you're speaking to the right person. 2, break them from the status quo. 3, explain the value that you offer. 4, tie in that value to the prospect's problem. Then number 5, set up the meeting, close that meeting. That's it. That's all there is to it. Not only is this the best strategy that I know of, and thousands of our students over at Salesman Simple Academy are doing this day in, day out and getting results, it's also going to keep you in control of the call. It's going to eliminate anxiety that you might have from doing cold calling because all I've got to do is say this, move to this step. Is it scenario 1 where they say yes? Is it scenario 2 where they say no? And then the next step and close the next meeting. That's it. You're going to reduce your anxiety massively because once you've done this 3, 4, 5, 10 times, that's all you're going to do. It's going to become robotic. It's going to become a system that you can rely on. And this is hopefully something that you can pick up today and start using this afternoon on your next batch of cold calls. So there we go. If you enjoyed this video, why not click the video that's on the screen right now and continue making selling simple.